My name is Evelyn Moore, and I'm 58 years old. For 35 years, I lived a quiet, peaceful life with my husband, Edward. We built a home in the countryside, surrounded by acres of green land and the distant hum of nature, a place that had become our sanctuary after the hustle and bustle of city life. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. It was just the two of us for the past several years after our children Lily and Mark moved out to start their own lives. At times, I felt a sense of quiet contentment as I watched the seasons change from the comfort of our little home. I had always believed I knew everything about Edward, about our life, about the love we had built together. I believed we had a solid foundation, one that had stood the test of time. I was wrong, of course. I had no idea how easily the life I thought I knew could fall apart. It was a Saturday evening in early autumn, a time when the leaves were turning golden, and the air had a crispness to it that made me think of long walks and warm fires. I had invited Lily and her fiancé, Greg, over for dinner. After all, it had been a while since we had all gathered around the table. I spent the whole afternoon preparing, wanting to make the evening special. The table was set with my grandmother's silverware, the one piece of her legacy I kept close to me. The crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, sparkling like tiny prisms, and I took pride in the simple elegance of it all. The smell of roast lamb and roasted vegetables filled the house, and I could feel the comfort of routine wrapping around me. The apple pie, made from my grandmother's recipe, was cooling on the windowsill. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. Lily was always the more headstrong of our children. She had been the fiery one, the one who always spoke her mind and never backed down from a challenge. At 30, she had an intensity about her that I admired and feared in equal measure. Her dark brown hair, so like mine, framed her face, but it was her sharp green eyes that always seemed to see more than most. Greg, on the other hand, was the opposite of Lily, gentle, soft-spoken, and quietly devoted to her. I could see why she had chosen him. He made her happy, and for that I was grateful. But that night, something felt different. Lily seemed preoccupied, her usual sharpness softened by an unfamiliar tension that lingered in her gaze. We sat down to eat, and the conversation flowed easily at first. Lily and Greg spoke about their wedding plans, discussing venues and guest lists, while Edward and I chimed in with our thoughts, offering our opinions in the way parents do. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I caught Lily touching her flat stomach several times throughout dinner, her fingers gently brushing the fabric of her dress, as though she wanted us to take notice. At first, I thought it was a subconscious gesture, but as the evening wore on, it became clear that it was intentional. She was waiting for something, for all of us to notice. And then, just as the silence between us became heavy with unspoken words, Lily stood up. She smiled brightly, and for a moment it seemed as though everything was perfectly normal. But then she dropped the bombshell. "I'm pregnant," she announced, her voice steady but carrying an air of finality. The room seemed to freeze. Greg leapt to his feet, his face lighting up with joy. "That's amazing, Lily. We're going to be parents." His words were filled with the purity of excitement, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to join in the celebration. This should have been a joyous occasion, a new beginning for the family. But when I looked at Lily, I saw something else. There was no warmth in her smile, no innocent joy. Instead, there was something darker, something I couldn't quite place. She wasn't looking at me. She wasn't looking at Greg. Her gaze was fixed on Edward, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. She lingered on him a moment too long, and I suddenly realized that this wasn't just about announcing a pregnancy. There was something more. My heart raced in my chest as the room seemed to close in around me. "Congratulations, sweetheart," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. But Lily wasn't finished. She slowly walked over to my side of the table, her steps measured, almost deliberate. She leaned down as though to give me a hug, and I braced myself for it. But instead, she whispered into my ear words that I will never forget. "The baby isn't Greg's," she said, her breath hot against my skin. "It's Edward's, your husband's baby." I froze, my world tilting on its axis. My breath caught in my throat as the weight of her words hit me. The laughter in the room, the clinking of glasses, all faded into a blur. How had this happened? How had I not seen it? My mind raced to process the truth, but it was too much, too fast. I pulled back, my body stiff with shock. "Don't worry, dear," I managed to say, my voice a fragile mask. "Everything will be fine." I tried to sound calm, but I was anything but. Inside, I was falling apart. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and hollow pleasantries. Lily and Greg talked excitedly about the future, about baby names and nursery plans, while Edward remained quiet, his eyes fixed on his plate. I could feel the distance between us, the gulf widening with each passing second. I couldn't look at him. Not yet. Not until I understood what was happening. The night dragged on in an unbearable silence. After Lily and Greg left, their excitement still hanging in the air like a lingering perfume, I found myself in the kitchen, staring at the remnants of our dinner. My dinner. The roast lamb that had been so lovingly prepared, the vegetables that had been roasted to perfection, now seemed like nothing more than a reminder of a life I no longer recognized. I stood there, the smell of the food thick in the room, unable to move, unable to think clearly. How had I missed it? How had I missed everything? Edward had retreated upstairs, and I could hear the quiet creak of the floorboards above me as he walked into our bedroom. I didn't follow him. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face him, to hear the excuses or the lies that I was sure would come. For the first time in over 30 years, I didn't know who the man I had married was. The life we had built, the foundation of trust, love, and companionship, suddenly felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest touch. I stayed in the kitchen long after everything had been cleaned up, my hands still gripping the counter, my mind racing in 1,000 directions. The words that Lily had whispered to me echoed in my mind, each repetition making the truth feel sharper, colder. The baby isn't Greg's. It's Edward's. I kept asking myself how it could have happened. I tried to replay the moments in my head. Any signs, any moments where I should have known something was wrong. But all I could see was a family dinner gone wrong. An announcement that was supposed to be joyful, tainted by a betrayal I could not comprehend. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break everything in sight. But I didn't. I just stood there, numb, my fingers curling around the edges of the kitchen counter as if it would somehow anchor me to reality. I had to think. I had to process everything that had happened. And yet, my mind felt foggy, clouded by disbelief and confusion. It wasn't until I finally made my way upstairs to our bedroom that I realized I hadn't cried. I hadn't shed a single tear since Lily's revelation. The flood of emotions I felt, betrayal, hurt, confusion, had left me paralyzed, unable to express anything. Edward was lying in bed, his back turned to me, his breathing shallow. I could tell he was awake, pretending to be asleep, perhaps waiting for me to say something, to confront him, to ask the questions that were burning inside me. But I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to speak just yet. I wasn't ready for whatever excuses he was going to offer, and part of me wasn't even sure if I wanted to hear them. I climbed into bed beside him, careful not to disturb him. The distance between us felt like an ocean. The bed that had once been a place of comfort, of shared moments and whispered words, now felt foreign and cold. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many nights we had spent in this bed while secrets had festered beneath the surface. How long had he been lying to me? How many times had I trusted him, only to have that trust shattered in an instant? As I lay there, my thoughts spinning, I began to notice the small things that had always seemed so insignificant. The way Edward had been more distant in the past few months, the late nights, the excuses. I thought back to the times he had come home late, only to brush it off with a half-hearted explanation. I had made excuses for him then, chalking it up to work or stress, but now it seemed so obvious. How had I been so blind? I realized then that I had been living in a state of denial, unwilling to see what was right in front of me. I heard Edward shift in the bed, and his voice, soft and hesitant, broke the silence. "Eve, I know you're upset, but can we talk?" His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The man who had once been my confidant, my partner, was asking me to talk. To talk about what? The affair? The betrayal? Or was he asking for forgiveness already, knowing that he had failed me in every way possible? "I don't know what you want me to say," I finally whispered, my voice barely audible. "How long, Edward? How long has this been going on?" There was a long pause, and I could feel him turning toward me, his presence heavy in the dark room. I didn't want this, Eve. I never meant for it to happen, he said, his voice thick with guilt. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm sorry. I thought I could fix everything without you ever knowing. I thought I could protect you from it. Protect me? The words came out harsher than I intended, my voice rising in frustration. You thought you could protect me by lying? By keeping secrets? By sleeping with my daughter-in-law? The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface now bubbled up, the hurt and betrayal spilling over in a flood of emotions. I trusted you, Edward. All these years, I trusted you, and you've betrayed me in the worst way possible. I could hear him sigh, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. I'm sorry, Eve. I really am. I never wanted to hurt you. But I didn't want his apologies. Not now. Not when everything was falling apart around me. I needed answers. I needed to understand how we had ended up here and why he hadn't trusted me with the truth. But deep down, I knew that the answers wouldn't come easily. The truth was messy and painful, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face it yet. As I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing, I realized that our life together had changed forever. We would never go back to the way things were. And the hardest part, the part that broke my heart more than the affair itself, was knowing that the trust I had built with Edward had crumbled, leaving nothing but an empty space between us. I turned away from him, staring out the window, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on me. Tomorrow, I would have to face the reality of this betrayal. But tonight, all I could do was lie in silence, wondering how I had missed the signs and questioning whether I could ever forgive him. The days that followed felt like they were happening to someone else, someone who had the strength to handle it, someone who could face the truth with grace. But not me. I was living in a haze, moving through the motions of daily life like a ghost, unable to escape the crushing weight of what I now knew. I'd always been someone who prided myself on being strong, on keeping things together even when life was hard. But now, all the strength I thought I had seemed to have evaporated into the air, leaving me vulnerable and raw. Every small detail of our life together, every quiet moment seemed like a betrayal. Edward and I barely spoke. It was like we were two strangers, coexisting in the same house but living in separate worlds. I would go through the motions, making breakfast, cleaning, taking care of the things I always did, but the actions felt mechanical. Edward tried, of course. He tried to talk to me, tried to explain himself, but each time he opened his mouth, I felt this visceral repulsion. He wasn't the man I had known for all these years. I couldn't even look at him without feeling sick to my stomach. How could he do this to me? How could he betray me, not just with another woman, but with someone so close to our family? I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me, and I was struggling to stay upright. I had spent the past few days replaying everything in my mind, trying to piece together the moments I had missed, the signs I should have seen. The late nights, the strange behavior, the phone calls he would take in another room, the excuses about work or errands that never quite added up. I'd been so wrapped up in our life, in our routine, that I had ignored the cracks forming beneath the surface. But now those cracks were gaping wide open, and I couldn't unsee the truth. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted, was not the person I thought he was. I found myself thinking about Lily more and more. I hadn't spoken to her since the dinner, but I couldn't get her out of my mind. How had she gotten to this point? What kind of woman does something like this? And how could she do it to me? To our family? She'd always been a bit of a mystery to me, her sharp intelligence and biting wit both fascinating and frustrating. But I never imagined she would be capable of something so cruel. She had always been close to me, and I had trusted her, loved her as my daughter-in-law. To think that she had been living this double life, pretending to be part of our family while secretly destroying it, made my heart ache. It wasn't until a week later that I finally gathered the courage to confront Edward again. I couldn't go on like this, stuck in this limbo of not knowing what was true and what wasn't. I needed to hear it all from him. I needed him to look me in the eyes and tell me everything, even if it destroyed me. I needed closure, or at least a glimpse of the truth. I found him in his study, the door slightly ajar. He was sitting at his desk, flipping through papers, his face set in that tired, weary expression I had seen so many times over the years. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him, my heart heavy with everything unsaid between us. He didn't notice me right away, and I almost turned away, but something inside me pushed me forward. I needed this. I needed him to face me. "Edward," I said, my voice hoarse from the days of silence. "We need to talk." He looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and relief. He probably thought I was finally ready to forgive him, to let it go and move on, but I wasn't. Not yet. Not until I had the answers I needed. He stood up slowly, his body language apologetic, almost submissive, as if waiting for me to say what was coming. "I know, Eve," he said, his voice low. "I know I've hurt you, and I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me. But I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you why I did what I did." I nodded, bracing myself for the truth. "Start from the beginning, Edward," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I need to hear it all. No more secrets." He took a deep breath, rubbing his hands together as though trying to find the right words. I could see the weight of his guilt in his eyes, but it wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough to undo the damage he'd caused. Still, I needed to hear it. "It started months ago," he began, his voice shaky. "Lily came to me one evening after you had gone to bed. She was upset. Her marriage with Greg wasn't perfect. They were having problems, and she wanted someone to talk to. I didn't think much of it. She's always been close to me, you know that. She was like a daughter to me." I nodded, though the words felt like a slap in my face. He continued, his gaze flicking to the side as if avoiding my eyes. "We talked a few times, just casual things at first, but then it became more personal. She started confiding in me more about her feelings, about her frustrations with Greg, about how she didn't feel loved. I was just trying to help her, Eve. I swear, I never meant for it to go this far. But one night, when she was really upset, we crossed a line. We— Don't," I interrupted, the words like a knife in my chest. I didn't want to hear how it happened, how he justified it. It didn't matter. Just tell me how long it's been going on. How long have you been lying to me, Edward? He closed his eyes, a deep, defeated sigh escaping his lips. "Since last winter," he said, his voice barely audible. "I never meant for you to find out like this. I thought I could fix it, that I could protect you and Lily from all of this, but I was wrong. I was selfish." "Selfish," I echoed, feeling the weight of his words press down on me. "Selfish doesn't begin to cover it, Edward. You betrayed me. You betrayed us all." He didn't respond, and I didn't need him to. I was no longer listening to his excuses. I had heard enough. The damage was done, and now all I had left was the painful truth. The next few days passed in a blur, each one feeling like it was part of some strange dream I couldn't wake up from. Edward and I continued to share a roof, but it was as if we were living in two separate worlds. He would try to talk to me, but I couldn't find the words to respond. I couldn't even bring myself to look at him for more than a few seconds without feeling a swell of nausea rise in my throat. The love I had once felt for him seemed like it belonged to another lifetime, and now all I had were the ruins of what we'd built. I spent most of my time at home, moving through the daily motions, but my mind was always somewhere else, always tangled in the web of lies and betrayal that had taken over my life. I couldn't escape the images of Edward and Lily together, even though I had no idea when it had started or how deep their connection had gone. All I knew was that everything I thought I understood about my family had been turned upside down. The house that had once felt like a safe haven now felt like a prison. I wasn't sleeping much. I would lie awake for hours at night, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing. I could hear Edward's breathing beside me, steady and calm, as if nothing had changed, while I felt like I was drowning in everything unsaid between us. There were nights when I would reach out for him, but it was always in vain. He didn't reach back. The touch that had once been so familiar now felt foreign and cold. I could feel the distance growing with each passing day, not just between me and Edward, but between me and the rest of the world. The betrayal weighed heavily on me, and I didn't know how to carry it. I started to withdraw from the people who had once been my support system, friends, even distant family members. What would I say to them? How could I explain that the life I had built was suddenly a lie? It wasn't until I received a letter from Lily that I realized how far down the rabbit hole I had fallen. She wrote to me, and I hadn't expected that. I wasn't sure what I had expected from her, but it certainly wasn't this. The letter was brief, but filled with enough words to make my stomach churn. She apologized, in her own way. But more than that, she tried to justify her actions. She wrote about how she'd felt neglected, about how Edward had been there for her when Greg couldn't, how their relationship had deepened over time. She claimed it wasn't just about sex, that it was about emotional support, something she hadn't felt in her marriage. Reading it felt like a slap in the face. How could she do this to me, to my family? How could she betray everything we had? I set the letter aside, my hands trembling. I didn't want to read it anymore, but I couldn't help myself. I found myself reading it over and over again, searching for some explanation that would make sense of this madness, but there was none. There was no justification for what she had done, no excuse for tearing apart the family I had worked so hard to build. I had thought about confronting her, calling her, demanding answers. But something in me stopped me. I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to face the woman who had shattered my world, who had been so cold and calculating, who had manipulated everyone around her with ease. I wasn't sure I could handle the confrontation I knew would be full of lies and half-truths. That night, I decided to leave. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a plan, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. The weight of everything, the lies, the secrets, the betrayal, it was too much for me to bear. I packed a small bag, not thinking about the things I was leaving behind, only knowing that I needed space, I needed time to breathe, to think. I didn't tell Edward I was leaving. I just slipped out quietly, taking my car and heading into the unknown. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I didn't care. I needed to be alone, away from everything that reminded me of the man who had once been my partner, my confidant, my love. The drive was long, but it gave me the time I needed to clear my head. The road stretched out before me, endless and empty, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace. I drove until the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden glow over the fields around me. I pulled over to the side of the road, stepping out of the car to stretch my legs. The air was cool, crisp, and I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lift off my shoulders, if only for a moment. I felt small out here, insignificant in the vastness of the world, but for the first time, I didn't feel suffocated by the pain. It was as though the distance between me and everything I had known allowed me to breathe again. That night, I found a small bed and breakfast in a quiet town. The place was cozy, tucked away from the world, and I was grateful for the solitude. The next morning, I woke early and took a walk through the surrounding woods, trying to clear my mind. It was strange how easy it was to walk away from everything. I hadn't realized how much I had been holding on to, how much of myself I had lost in the process of trying to hold everything together. But now, in this small town, with nothing to distract me, I was forced to face myself, and the truth that had been so hard to accept. I didn't know what the future held, or if Edward and I would ever find our way back to each other. But for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the truth, no matter how painful, would lead to something better. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Something I couldn't see yet, but something I was finally ready to find. The days in the small town stretched on, each one blending into the next, as though time itself had slowed down. I found a rhythm in the simplicity of life here, a rhythm that was absent from the chaos I had left behind. It was strange, being alone. At first, I felt like I was running away from the reality I couldn't face, but soon, the quiet was exactly what I needed. The weight of the world that had been on my shoulders seemed lighter, and my mind, for the first time in weeks, wasn't clouded by the lies and the hurt. I wasn't sure how long I could stay here. I wasn't even sure where here was, but for the moment, I didn't need to know. I just needed to breathe. I spent my days wandering around the town, taking long walks in the woods, exploring the little shops, or sitting by the lake, watching the water ripple and listening to the birds. Every so often, I would think about Edward. How could I not? He was still my husband, and despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal, he was still a part of me. But as the days went by, the pain of his lies dulled just a little. I still didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know if I ever would. But I was beginning to realize that I didn't need to know everything to heal. One afternoon, after a long walk, I sat on a bench by the lake, the cool breeze running through my hair. The sun was starting to set, casting an orange glow over the water. I pulled my coat tighter around me, grateful for the warmth, but it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was the realization that I was changing, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I had always thought of myself as strong, as someone who could face anything, but now I wasn't so sure. The person I was before the lies, before the betrayal, was gone, and I didn't know what I was supposed to be now. I thought about Lily, too. In the days that followed her letter, I had decided to put off confronting her. What was there to say, really? I had questions, but I wasn't sure if they would help me understand or just make things worse. She had made her choice. She had hurt me, and I couldn't just forgive that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But there was something about her actions, her calculated moves, that I couldn't ignore. How could someone who had been so close to me, someone I had trusted, do this? How could she betray me like this? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. It wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't even just about the lies. It was the manipulation, the coldness with which she had taken control of my family, of my life. She had played me, played us all, and I didn't know how to process that. The idea of confronting her still seemed overwhelming, but I knew one thing: I couldn't just let this slide. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, my truth. The next morning, I woke early, feeling restless. I needed to do something. I couldn't just sit around waiting for the world to settle itself. So I decided to call Edward. My heart pounded in my chest as I dialed his number, the sound of the ringing phone almost too much to bear. I hadn't spoken to him in over a week, and the silence between us had only grown. But I couldn't keep running from the truth forever. I needed to hear it from him, face to face. When he picked up, his voice was tentative, like he wasn't sure how to begin. "Eve," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't think I'd hear from you again." "I needed space," I replied, my voice sounding foreign to me. "But I can't keep running away from this. We need to talk." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him holding his breath. "I know, Eve," he said finally. "I've been waiting for this." "I'm coming back," I said. The words felt heavy, but they were true. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there, but I knew I couldn't stay away forever. I couldn't keep hiding from the people I loved. "I don't know what will happen next, but I need to see you. I need to know if there's anything worth saving." I heard him exhale, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe, or just the spark of a possibility. "I'll be here," he said quietly. "I'll wait for you." And just like that, I felt the weight of the world shift, even if only slightly. The future was still uncertain, but I wasn't ready to let go. I wasn't ready to give up on everything I had known. I had to face it, whatever it was, because I knew that in the end, the only way forward was through the pain. That evening, I packed up my things, checked out of the bed and breakfast, and started the long drive back to the house. I didn't know what to expect when I got there. Edward and I had so much to figure out: the hurt, the lies, the years we had spent building a life that now seemed like a house of cards. But for the first time in days, I wasn't afraid to face it. Whatever came next, I would face it with my eyes open, no more hiding from the truth. I arrived home late that night, the house as quiet as I had left it, but now it felt different, more like a place I didn't recognize. I stood in the doorway, looking at the familiar surroundings, and felt a pang of something I hadn't expected. Regret, maybe, or just the bittersweetness of a life that had been altered forever. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that I wasn't alone in this. I had my own strength, and I was ready to use it. Edward was waiting for me in the living room, his face weary and full of remorse. I didn't know if we could fix what had been broken, but I knew we had to try. For us, for the future, for whatever piece of us was still worth saving. The next morning, I woke up early, the remnants of a restless sleep still clinging to me. The house felt heavy, as though it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The quiet of the morning was almost unbearable after everything that had unfolded. Edward was already up, moving around the kitchen, making coffee. It seemed like he was doing everything he could to pretend things were normal. But there was nothing normal about this. Nothing about the last few weeks had been normal. The air between us was thick with everything unsaid, and it felt like I was suffocating in it. I walked into the kitchen, and Edward looked up when he heard my footsteps. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, hope, maybe, but also guilt, too much guilt to hide. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good morning," he said softly, as though testing the waters. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I poured myself a cup of coffee, the warmth of the mug a small comfort in my trembling hands. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, suffocating any chance of a real conversation. I could feel the tension in my chest, my heart beating faster as I realized how much was riding on this moment. I had come back to face the truth, but I wasn't sure how to begin. "Eve," Edward said finally, his voice quiet and shaky, "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I need you to understand that what happened, it wasn't what I planned. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I didn't look at him, my eyes focused on the steam rising from my cup. "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" I repeated, my voice low and controlled. "Edward, you didn't mean to have an affair with our daughter-in-law? You didn't mean to betray me, to destroy everything we built together." My heart was hammering in my chest, and for a moment I was afraid I would burst into tears, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. How long were you planning on keeping this a secret? How long were you going to let me live in this lie? There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know. I thought I could fix it, Eve. I thought I could keep you from finding out. I thought if I played along, if I kept pretending, maybe things would go back to normal. Maybe we could just move on and forget about it. I was wrong. I was so wrong." His words hit me like a slap to the face. I felt the sting of his betrayal all over again. How could he have been so naive, so foolish? Did he really think I wouldn't notice? Did he really believe that I wouldn't eventually find out? The pain that surged through me was almost overwhelming, and I had to take a deep breath to steady myself. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I said quietly, finally looking up at him. "The man I married would never do this. The man I loved would never tear apart our family like this." The words felt like daggers in my mouth, but I forced them out one by one. "You lied to me, Edward. You lied to our son, to our family. And for what? To protect Lily? To protect your own ego?" "I never wanted to hurt anyone," Edward said, his voice breaking. He took a step toward me, his hands outstretched, but I backed away, my heart racing with a mixture of anger and hurt. "I never meant for it to get out of hand, Eve. I thought I could fix it, thought I could protect you and Mark from the truth. I was wrong. I should have told you. I should have trusted you." "Trusted me?" I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You should have trusted me? After everything you've done? After the lies? After the affair? After betraying me in the most intimate way possible, you think I'm the one you need to trust?" My voice was shaking now, but I couldn't stop. "You don't get to ask for my trust, Edward. Not anymore. Not after everything." Edward's face crumpled, the weight of my words sinking in. He reached up to rub his eyes, as though trying to erase the reality of the situation. I know I've messed up. I can't take back what I've done. But I'm here now, Eve. I'm not going anywhere. Please, I just need a chance to make this right. I need to show you that I still love you." The pain in his eyes was genuine, but it wasn't enough to undo what had been done. "Love me?" I echoed, almost incredulously. "You don't get to love me, Edward. Not after what you've done. Not after betraying my trust like this. Love isn't enough to fix this." He fell silent, staring at me with wide, pleading eyes. I could see the remorse, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I whispered, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "I don't know if I ever will." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak, hung between us like a thick, suffocating fog. I could feel myself unraveling, but I didn't know how to stop it. My heart was torn in two, and I couldn't decide if I wanted to scream or cry, or if I just wanted to run away and never look back. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Edward said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. But I'll wait. I'll wait for as long as it takes, Eve. Because I love you. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean much right now, but I am. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right if you'll let me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he was sincere, that there was a chance for us, but I didn't know if I could. Not yet. Not when the hurt was still so raw, so fresh. I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. Give me time, I said, my voice hoarse, the words barely audible. Give me time to figure this out. Edward nodded, his face filled with both hope and sorrow. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the fear that maybe I wouldn't ever come back to him. And maybe I wouldn't. But for now, I needed space. I needed time to decide what my next step would be, to decide if there was any part of us worth saving. As I turned away from him, I knew that this was just the beginning. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes, but I was ready to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward healing. The next few days felt like a blur, a constant swirl of emotions I couldn't seem to grasp hold of. Each moment with Edward felt like it was pulling me in two different directions, like I was being torn apart by the very people I loved most. I spent most of my time alone, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. Was this the end of us? Could I forgive him? Did I even want to? The weight of the decision I had to make loomed over me, heavy and suffocating. I stayed in the house, but it no longer felt like home. There was too much history here, too many memories of happier times, times that now seemed so far away. The quiet was oppressive, and I found myself unable to escape the thoughts that haunted me. Edward had given me space, as I had asked, but every time he tried to reach out, it felt like he was pulling me back into a life I wasn't sure I wanted anymore. I started spending more time outside, walking through the garden, trying to find some semblance of peace. The garden had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could clear my mind and reconnect with myself. But now it felt different. The flowers were still blooming, the trees still standing tall, but everything seemed to have lost its vibrancy. Even the sunshine felt muted, as though it too were aware of the darkness that had crept into my life. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk along the old trail behind the house. It was a path I used to walk with Edward, the two of us hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. But now, I walked alone, my footsteps the only sound breaking the silence. The air was crisp, the leaves rustling underfoot as I made my way down the trail. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, or if I was looking for anything at all, but I needed something to help me sort through the chaos in my mind. As I walked, my thoughts drifted back to the night I found out about the affair. I remembered the sharpness of Lily's whisper, the coldness in her eyes as she told me the truth. I had been so stunned in the moment, so wrapped up in disbelief that I couldn't even process what was happening. But now, days later, I could feel the weight of her betrayal settling into my bones. She had crossed a line, and the damage she had done was irreparable. I couldn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And maybe that was what hurt the most, that someone I had loved like family could be capable of something so cruel. But as angry as I was with Lily, my anger with Edward ran deeper. He had betrayed me, not just with her, but by keeping secrets from me. How could he think I wouldn't find out? How could he lie to me for so long, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the betrayal of trust. We had spent our lives building something together, and he had shattered it in a single selfish moment. I stopped walking and stood at the edge of the trail, looking out at the vast expanse of trees that stretched out before me. It was beautiful, serene even, but I couldn't escape the feeling that my world was broken beyond repair. The person I had once trusted with my heart had let me down, and now I was left to pick up the pieces. That's when I realized that I couldn't keep living in the past, no matter how painful it was. I couldn't keep holding on to the image of the man I thought I knew. The Edward I had loved had been replaced by someone else, someone I didn't recognize. And maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest part of all, that the person I had trusted most had become a stranger. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of everything. My mind was still clouded with anger and hurt, but there was something else there too, a sense of clarity. I couldn't undo what had been done, but I could decide how to move forward. I couldn't control Edward's actions, but I could control my own. When I returned home, Edward was waiting for me in the living room. He looked up when I walked in, his face full of uncertainty. I didn't know how to feel in that moment. I wanted to yell, to scream, to demand answers. But the truth was, I didn't need to hear any more excuses. I needed to make a choice. I needed to decide if I could ever trust him again, if there was even a chance for us. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not." He looked at me, his expression pleading. "Eve, I'm sorry. I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I need you to know that I love you. I always have. I just made the biggest mistake of my life, and I'm trying to fix it. I'll do whatever it takes." I looked at him for a long time, my mind spinning with all the emotions I had been carrying. I didn't know if I could forgive him. I didn't know if I ever would. But in that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about Edward. It was about me too. It was about whether or not I could find it within myself to heal, to move past the betrayal, to reclaim my life. "I need time," I said softly. "I need time to figure this out. I don't know if we can fix this, Edward, but I need to find out who I am before I decide if I want to fix this with you." He nodded, his face a mixture of relief and fear. "I'll wait for you. I'll wait as long as you need." And for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of control, a sense of peace. I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't sure if I would ever fully heal from the wounds that had been inflicted. But I knew one thing. I wasn't ready to give up yet. I wasn't ready to let go of the family we had built, of the love that we had shared. And so I would wait. I would wait to see if forgiveness was possible, if healing could happen, and if we could rebuild what had been broken. For now, that was enough. The days that followed felt like a delicate balancing act. I tried to move through the motions of daily life, cooking, cleaning, going for my walks, but nothing felt the same. Every step felt like I was walking on eggshells, both with Edward and with myself. The space I had asked for had given me a semblance of clarity, but it didn't answer the questions that kept swirling in my mind. Could I forgive him? Could I trust him again? Would we ever find our way back to each other, or was this the end of the road? Edward was trying. I could give him that. He was doing everything he could to make up for what he'd done, but every time he looked at me with those hopeful eyes, I felt a knot form in my stomach. His actions had shattered something in me, something I wasn't sure I could ever put back together. He had hurt me in ways I never thought possible, and now I had to decide whether that hurt was something I could move past or if it would define the rest of my life. One afternoon, I decided to go back to the house we had spent so many years building together. I needed to see it again, to feel the weight of the memories we had created there. Maybe, just maybe, it would give me a sense of closure, or at least help me understand how we had ended up here. When I arrived, the house was quiet, just as I had left it, but it felt so different now. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. Every corner seemed to echo with the past, with the laughter, the arguments, the moments of tenderness, all of it now tainted by betrayal. I went into the living room where we had spent so many nights talking, watching TV, and enjoying each other's company. The couch was still the same, the pillows in their usual spots, but it felt like a stranger's house. It wasn't the home I had shared with Edward for so many years. It felt empty, hollow, like a stage set for a play I no longer wanted to be a part of. I sank down onto the couch, my hands resting in my lap as I stared at the room. This was the place where it all started, where our lives had intertwined so completely. And now it felt like everything had come crashing down, leaving only the remains of what once was. I couldn't stay in that room for long. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I needed to get out, to breathe. I grabbed my coat and headed out the back door, walking into the garden, the one place that had always brought me peace. The roses Edward had planted years ago were still blooming, their delicate petals a quiet reminder of the love we had once shared. I bent down to touch one, the soft petals brushing against my fingertips. It was still beautiful, despite everything. I stood there for a long time, letting the cool breeze wash over me. I needed to clear my mind, to figure out where I stood in all of this. Edward had been asking for forgiveness, pleading with me to give him a chance to make things right. But what did that even mean? Could a simple apology undo years of trust built on lies? Could I ever look at him the same way again? Was forgiveness even possible when the betrayal had cut so deep? I thought about Lily, too. I hadn't seen her since the dinner where everything came to light, and part of me didn't want to. She had played a role in this, yes, but it was Edward who had betrayed me first. I couldn't deny the hurt I felt from her actions, but the pain she had caused paled in comparison to what Edward had done. She had crossed a line, but it was Edward who had let her in, who had allowed her to get close enough to break everything. But as angry as I was with her, I knew I had to face it. I couldn't hide from the truth forever, and I couldn't ignore the fact that I needed answers from her as much as I did from Edward. I had to confront her, and I had to do it soon. The uncertainty I had been living with was unbearable. It was time to demand the truth, to get the closure I needed to move forward. That evening, after another strained dinner with Edward, I sat down with him in the living room. I wasn't sure where to begin, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending like nothing had happened. The truth was out there, and it was time for me to face it, for both of our sakes. "I'm going to talk to her," I said quietly, looking down at my hands in my lap. Edward's eyes widened with surprise, and for a moment he seemed unsure of how to respond. "Talk to who?" he asked, his voice hesitant. "To Lily," I said firmly. "I need to hear it from her. I need to know why she did what she did, and I need to hear her side of the story." Edward was silent for a moment, the weight of my words settling between us. "I don't know if you should. It's not going to make anything better, Eve," he said softly. "It's not going to change what's happened." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "But I can't move forward until I understand everything. I can't forgive what I don't fully understand." He looked at me with sadness in his eyes, but he didn't argue. He knew this was something I had to do, even if it meant reopening old wounds. I didn't know what the conversation with Lily would bring, or if it would give me any answers at all. But I had to try. For my own peace of mind, for my own healing. "I'll be ready," I said quietly, standing up and walking toward the door. "But I can't promise I'll come back with the answers I want." Edward didn't stop me. He didn't try to hold me back. Instead, he just nodded, his face filled with a mixture of guilt and resignation. And with that, I walked out the door, not knowing what would come next, but knowing I had to take this step for myself. It was time to face the truth. The drive to Lily's house felt longer than it should have, each passing mile making my heart beat faster in my chest. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, and no matter how many deep breaths I took, the tension in my body only grew. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. What could I expect from her? What answers could she possibly provide that would make any of this make sense? But I had made the decision, and now there was no turning back. I had to hear it from her. I had to know how deep the deception ran, and maybe, just maybe, it would bring me some semblance of closure. I arrived at her house, the one she and Greg had moved into just over a year ago, and as I parked in front, I saw the lights on inside. A small part of me wanted to turn around and leave, to drive away and never face her again, but I had to do this. I had to. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my purse and stepped out of the car. My legs felt heavy, each step toward her door feeling like I was walking through molasses, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on me. I knocked 3 times, each tap echoing in the stillness of the night. There was a moment of silence before I heard the sound of footsteps approaching from inside. The door opened, and there she was, Lily. Her blonde hair, still styled the way she always wore it, framed her face as she looked at me with an unreadable expression. There was a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but she quickly masked it, replacing it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Eve," she said, her voice laced with a sweetness that I could no longer trust. "I wasn't expecting you." I didn't return her smile. Instead, I took a step forward, meeting her gaze head-on. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. She hesitated for just a moment, her gaze flickering to the side before she stepped back and motioned for me to enter. "Come in, then," she said softly, a note of apprehension creeping into her voice. I followed her inside, noting the pristine and almost clinical neatness of her home. It was a place that didn't feel lived in, not the way ours had been, filled with memories and love. This place felt empty, just like her. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us thick and uncomfortable. I couldn't stop looking at her, the woman who had been a part of my family for so long, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst way. I could still feel the sting of her whisper that night, her cold words cutting through me like a knife. I could feel the anger rise within me again, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let her control this conversation. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice steady. "I want you to tell me why you did this." Lily looked at me, her lips pressing together in a tight line, as though she were considering how best to respond. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the same hesitation I had seen before. But this time, it wasn't about trying to play the innocent. She knew what she had done. She knew how much damage she had caused. "I never meant for it to happen like this," she began, her voice faltering slightly. "I never meant to hurt you, Eve. It was just that things with Greg weren't the way they were supposed to be. He's a good man, but we weren't connecting. Not the way I needed him to." I sat up straighter, my chest tightening with frustration. "And so you decided to sleep with my husband? That's your explanation? You couldn't find someone else to confide in? Someone who wasn't married to your mother-in-law? You couldn't find a way to fix your marriage with Greg without destroying mine?" Lily's eyes dropped to the floor, and I could see the guilt flashing across her face, but it was fleeting. "It wasn't like that," she said quietly, her voice low and strained. "It wasn't just about the physical part. Edward was there for me. He listened when I needed someone to talk to, and I was lonely. I felt like I had no one. And then one night, after everything, it just happened." I felt a wave of anger surge through me, and I had to bite my lip to keep from yelling. "You were lonely?" I repeated, disbelief in my voice. "So that makes it okay? You crossed the line with my husband because you were lonely?" I stood up from the couch, unable to stay seated. The pain I had been holding inside exploded outward, and my voice trembled with the weight of it. "You knew what you were doing, Lily. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted him, and you took him. You didn't care about me, about what it would do to our family. You only cared about yourself." Lily's face tightened, but she didn't say anything. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. For a moment, we just stood there, the space between us filled with nothing but the echoes of my words. "I'm sorry, Eve," she said finally, her voice small, almost apologetic. "I never wanted it to be like this. I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't take it back now." I stared at her, my chest aching with the weight of her words. I wanted to scream, to demand more from her, to make her understand how deeply she had broken me. But I didn't. Instead, I took a deep breath and said the words I knew I had to say, even though they tasted bitter in my mouth. "I can't forgive you, Lily," I whispered. "Not now. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Her face fell, the mask of calm finally cracking, and I could see the rawness beneath. She looked at me for a long moment, as though she were trying to figure out how to fix things, how to make it all right again. But there was nothing she could say. No words would undo what had been done. "I understand," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." I turned and walked toward the door, my heart heavy with the weight of everything. "Goodbye, Lily," I said, not looking back. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be here. Not anymore." And with that, I left, closing the door behind me, knowing that the final chapter of this betrayal had been written. But my story wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. As I drove back home, I felt a strange sense of detachment. The weight of what had just transpired, the conversation with Lily, still hung in the air. But I didn't know where to put it. It was as if my body was functioning on autopilot, my mind in a sort of numb haze, unable to process everything at once. I wasn't sure what I had expected to gain from confronting her. Answers, closure, some kind of apology. But whatever I had hoped for, I hadn't found it. I had seen the guilt in her eyes, but it wasn't enough. There was no redemption, no real remorse. She had crossed a line, and she hadn't even acknowledged how deep the wound was. I pulled into the driveway, the familiar sight of my house both comforting and painful. The evening light was dimming, and the quiet stillness of the place only amplified the knot in my stomach. Edward was probably home by now, waiting for me, hoping I had somehow come back with a softening heart, a willingness to forgive. I wasn't sure if I was ready for that, if I ever would be, but I knew this was the moment where everything had to change. I had gone to Lily to get the answers, and now it was time to face the one person who had broken my trust more than anyone else, Edward. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside, the familiar smell of home, freshly brewed coffee, a hint of cedar from the fireplace, the faint scent of my lavender candles, hit me immediately. It felt like a cruel joke, how normal everything looked. The warmth of the house, the soft flicker of candlelight on the table, made it seem like nothing had happened. But something had. Something irreparable. I heard him moving in the kitchen. His footsteps, heavy with hesitation, grew louder as I moved into the living room. He was standing by the counter, his back to me, his shoulders slumped. The sight of him like this, broken, defeated, struck something deep inside me. The man I had loved for so long was still in there somewhere, but it was hard to see him through all the lies, all the hurt. "Eve," he said softly, turning to face me. His eyes were red, as if he'd been holding back tears, waiting for me to come home. I stood still, not knowing how to react. He was waiting for something, but I wasn't sure if I could give it to him. He took a step toward me, his voice shaking with the words he had been holding in. "I'm sorry. I know you've been through so much, and I know I've hurt you more than you can imagine, but I'm still here. I still love you. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." The words sounded sincere, but I didn't know if they were enough. "You don't get to love me, Edward," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Not anymore. Not like you used to. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I'll ever be able to." The silence between us was thick, filled with years of unspoken words and buried emotions. He looked at me, his face a mixture of regret and something else, something that looked like fear. "Please, Eve, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'll spend my life trying to make it right. I just need a chance to prove to you that I can be the man you thought I was." I felt the weight of his words settle on me like a heavy blanket, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Not after everything that had happened. "You think you can fix this with words, Edward? That you can just say the right things and everything will go back to normal? It doesn't work like that. I don't even know who you are anymore." The anger I had been holding back surged to the surface, and I couldn't stop it. "How could you betray me like this? How could you do this to our family? To us? Do you realize what you've taken from me? From us? It's not just about the affair. It's about the lies, the years of deceit. How long were you planning on keeping this from me?" "I wasn't planning on keeping it from you," he said desperately. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought if I kept it hidden, if I just went along with her, maybe it would blow over. Maybe it wouldn't hurt as much." He paused, his eyes searching mine for some sign that I would relent. But I was wrong. I know that now. I was selfish, Eve, and I regret it more than anything. I shook my head, my mind spinning with the magnitude of what he was saying. He regretted it now, but where was that regret when it mattered? Where was it when he was lying to my face, when he was betraying my trust? It felt hollow, empty, like 1,000 apologies would never undo what had been done. "I can't keep living like this, Edward," I whispered, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I need more than your regret. I need more than your promises. I need to know that you can be the man I thought you were. But right now, I don't know if that man is even still inside of you." He closed his eyes, as if the words were too much for him to bear. "I know I don't deserve you, Eve. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that I'm still worth something, that I'm still worth being the man you once loved." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, and I had to look away. The pain of it all, of him, of Lily, of everything, was almost too much to bear. I didn't know if I could forgive him. I didn't know if I ever would. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. Not yet. Not until I had figured out who I was without him, without the life we had built together. I need time, Edward, I said softly, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I had said. I need time to figure out if this is something we can fix, if this is something I can fix. But right now, I can't do this. I can't keep living in this limbo. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart heavy with the uncertainty of what was to come. I didn't know if Edward and I would ever find our way back to each other. But for the first time in a long time, I knew I had to find my own way first. I had to find myself again. Only then could I decide if there was anything left worth saving. It's strange how time can change your perspective. When I first walked away from Edward, when I first took that step out the door and into the unknown, I thought I was running away. I thought I was hiding from the pain, avoiding the inevitable confrontation with the life I had known. But as the days passed, I realized something. Leaving wasn't about running away. It was about running toward something. Toward myself. Toward the person I used to be before all the lies, before the betrayal. I spent the next few days in the quiet space I had created for myself, reflecting on everything that had happened. There was a strange sense of peace in the solitude, but also an overwhelming sense of loss. The pain I had been carrying felt like a weight I couldn't get rid of, but at least I could breathe again. I had time, and time was something I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. Edward, for his part, had respected my need for space. He had called a few times, left a few messages, but I hadn't answered. Part of me wanted to reach out, to reassure him that I hadn't given up on us entirely, but I knew that wouldn't help. Not right now. I wasn't ready to fix anything. I needed to fix me first. I had to understand what I wanted, what I needed from him, before I could even think about rebuilding what had been broken. I started taking long walks, the ones I used to take when I was younger, before all the complications of adulthood. I found myself gravitating to the places that had always brought me comfort. Parks, lakesides, quiet streets where the world seemed to move a little slower. The rhythm of my steps, the steady pace of my breathing, brought me a sense of control, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I began to realize how much of myself I had lost in the years I spent trying to hold everything together, trying to keep the peace at all costs. I had neglected my own needs, my own voice, because I had been so focused on making sure everyone else was happy. It was a hard realization, but it was also liberating. I didn't have to keep living in the shadow of my past, in the shadow of Edward's mistakes. I had my own life, my own future to build. And as painful as it was, I was starting to see that maybe there was life after the hurt. It wasn't about forgiving too quickly, about pretending everything was fine. It was about finding the strength to live my truth, to stand up for what I needed, even if that meant walking away from what I thought was my future. But just as I was starting to accept this newfound clarity, just as I was beginning to feel like I was finally on the right path, the world seemed to throw another curveball my way. It was a phone call from Mark, my son. His voice on the other end of the line was shaky, filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Concern? "Mom, I need you to come home," he said. "There's something you need to know." That simple sentence, that one line, sent a chill down my spine. My first instinct was to say no, to stay in the peace I had finally found. But I knew better. I knew something was wrong. Something had shifted. So, without hesitation, I told him I would be there. I packed my things, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me as I made the drive back to the house, the same house that had been the scene of so much heartbreak, so much pain. The drive felt long, endless, but in a strange way, it was comforting. It was a return to something familiar, even though I wasn't sure what I was walking back to. When I arrived, Mark was waiting outside, his face drawn, his expression tight. I could see the stress in his eyes, and I immediately knew that whatever he needed to tell me, it wasn't good. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "it's about Dad." My heart stopped. My mind raced, trying to anticipate what he was about to say. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. "Dad? He's sick, really sick, and he didn't want you to know." The words hit me like a physical blow, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. "Edward? Sick? What kind of sickness? What did this mean?" "What do you mean? What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mark took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. He's been hiding it for months, Mom. It's cancer. Stage 3. He doesn't have much time left. I froze. The world seemed to tilt, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Cancer? Edward? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. The man I had spent my life with, the man I had shared everything with, was dying, and he hadn't told me. He hadn't said a word. My mind spiraled, and I felt a wave of anger rise inside me, not just for his betrayal, but for this. This was something he should have shared with me. We should have been facing this together. Mark looked at me, his face full of concern. He's really sorry, Mom. He didn't want to burden you with it, especially after everything that happened. But you need to know, he needs you now. I stood there, unable to move as the weight of his words settled on me. I wasn't sure what I felt anymore. Anger, disbelief, sadness. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face this new reality, if I could face Edward in this state after everything he had done. But I knew one thing. I couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not when there was no time left. Take me to him, I said finally, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. It wasn't about forgiveness. Not yet. It wasn't about all the things he had done wrong. It was about the man I had loved for so many years. The man I still loved, even through all the hurt. I followed Mark inside, feeling the weight of everything, of the past, of the betrayal, of this new revelation, pressing down on me. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I knew I had to be there for him. For better or worse, he was still the man who had once been my everything. And now, with the time we had left, it was time to face it. The house was eerily quiet when we walked in, the stillness hanging heavily in the air. Mark led me through the hallway, and as we approached Edward's room, I could hear the faint sound of his breathing, slow and labored. I hesitated at the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The man who had once been my partner, the man I had shared everything with, was lying there, fighting for his life. The thought of him like this, vulnerable and fragile, was almost too much to bear. After everything, after the affair, after the lies, here he was, needing me. And yet, I wasn't sure if I could give him what he needed. Mark stepped inside first, his eyes tired. But there was something else there, concern, maybe even guilt. He'd been carrying this burden for months, silently watching his father deteriorate while I had been miles away, trying to pick up the pieces of my own shattered life. He looked at me for a moment before walking over to Edward's bedside, sitting down in the chair beside him. I followed, my steps heavy, as if the weight of the situation had grounded me. Edward looked so different from the man I had known, his face pale, his once bright eyes now dimmed by exhaustion and pain. His hair had thinned, his features gaunt, and the years of wear and tear on his body were evident. I could barely recognize him. This wasn't the strong, steady man I had shared 30 years with. This was a man who had been broken, a man who was running out of time. I stood at the foot of the bed, unsure of what to do, what to say. The last time we'd been together, it had been filled with anger, resentment, and heartbreak. Now there was nothing but a deep, painful silence. Edward's eyes fluttered open, and he looked at me as though he couldn't quite believe I was standing there. His voice was weak when he spoke. "Eve," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I didn't expect you to come." I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "You didn't think I'd come?" I said softly, the hurt from all that had happened creeping back into my voice despite my efforts to keep it in check. "You didn't think I'd come when you needed me?" Edward's eyes flickered with guilt. "I didn't want to drag you into this," he whispered. "I didn't want to burden you with all of this. I know I've hurt you more than I could ever explain, and I didn't want to give you any more reasons to walk away from me." I felt a sharp pain in my chest at his words. He was right. He had hurt me more than I ever thought possible. And yet, here I was, standing by his side, not out of obligation, but because in this moment, I knew I couldn't turn my back on him. No matter how much he had broken me. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something else. Something I couldn't quite name. "I'm here, Edward," I said quietly, my voice shaky. "But I can't promise you anything. I can't pretend that everything is okay. I can't pretend that what you didn't change everything. But I'm here." He reached out slowly, his hand trembling as it extended toward me. I hesitated for a moment, and then, almost instinctively, I took his hand in mine. The touch was different now, softer, more fragile. The warmth that had once been so familiar now felt like a distant memory. "I'm sorry," Edward whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. I should have trusted you, but I didn't, and now I don't know what to do." I squeezed his hand, trying to steady myself, to keep my emotions in check, but they were there, bubbling beneath the surface, threatening to spill over. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said quietly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "I don't know if I ever will, but right now, I just want to be here with you, for whatever time you have left." Edward's eyes filled with tears, his grip tightening on my hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for being here. Even after everything, you're still here." I sat down beside him, the weight of everything still heavy on my chest. There were so many things I wanted to say, so many questions I needed answers to, but in that moment, I knew there was no point in asking. The answers wouldn't change what had already been done, and the truth, no matter how painful, had already been laid bare between us. We sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds the soft rustling of the sheets and the rhythmic sound of Edward's breathing. I wanted to say more, to tell him everything I was feeling, but the words wouldn't come. I couldn't bring myself to say anything that would make it all feel final. I looked over at Mark, who was quietly watching us from his seat by the window. His face was unreadable, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. He had been through so much, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for not being there for him sooner. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Edward spoke again, his voice soft but steady. "I don't know if I'll have much time left, Eve, but I want you to know. I've always loved you. I still do. I don't know if that means anything now, but I want you to know it." I nodded, my heart aching with the weight of his words. "I know," I whispered. "I know you loved me, but love isn't enough, Edward. It never has been." He closed his eyes, and I could see the tears slipping down his cheeks. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so, so sorry." I didn't say anything after that. There was nothing left to say. The man I had once known, the man I had spent my life with, was slipping away before my eyes. And while part of me wanted to scream, wanted to yell at him for everything he had done, another part of me knew it was pointless. The hurt was there, but so was the love that had once been enough to carry us through anything. As I sat there, holding his hand, I realized something. I didn't have to forgive him now. I didn't have to have all the answers. I just had to be present. And for now, that was enough. The next few days felt like they were stretched out over an eternity. Edward's condition worsened quickly, as I knew it would. There were moments when I would sit by his bedside, holding his hand, and I would see glimpses of the man he had once been. His smile, the familiar twinkle in his eyes that I remembered so well, would flicker through the fog of illness. But they were fleeting moments, gone almost as quickly as they appeared. His body was growing weaker, his breathing slower. The man I had spent so many years with, the man I had once loved so deeply, was slipping away in front of me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Mark came by every day, sometimes with his wife, sometimes alone, but always with a quiet presence that seemed to anchor Edward when his pain became too much to bear. I could see the toll it was taking on him. The weight of watching his father, the man who had once been so strong and reliable, now reduced to a shadow of himself, was something he couldn't quite put into words. But the silence between us spoke volumes. We didn't need to say anything. We both knew what the other was feeling. One evening, after another long day of sitting in that same sterile room, Edward turned to me with a tired, almost defeated look in his eyes. "Eve," he whispered, his voice thin and raspy, "I know I don't have much time left, and I know I've done so much to hurt you, but I need you to know something." I leaned in closer, my heart aching with the knowledge that I was running out of time with him, too. Despite everything, I still felt the need to listen, to hear him out, even though my mind was clouded with everything that had happened. "What is it, Edward?" I asked, my voice steady, though inside I felt like I was falling apart. "What do you need to tell me?" He took a deep breath, his chest rising slowly, as if gathering what little strength he had left. "I never wanted to hurt you, Eve. Not then, not now. I've spent my whole life trying to protect you, trying to shield you from the things that could break us. But I failed. I failed you in the worst way possible. And I am so, so sorry. The words felt heavy in the room, but they also felt like the truth. I didn't need to hear them to know they were sincere. I had heard them before in different ways, in different moments, but now, with the reality of his illness hanging over us, they seemed more urgent, more desperate. I know, I said quietly. I know you didn't want to hurt me, but you did, and I can't just forget that. I don't expect you to, he replied, his eyes filled with sorrow. I don't expect anything, but I need you to know that I loved you. I still love you, Eve. I don't know how to make up for what I did, but if I could go back and do it all differently, I would. I would choose you over and over again. The pain in his voice was palpable, and for a moment I let myself believe him. I let myself remember the man I had fallen in love with, the man who had once held me close and promised me the world. But that man was gone now. He was buried beneath the lies, beneath the betrayal, and no matter how much he apologized, no matter how many times he said he was sorry, I couldn't just let go of the hurt. The betrayal was too deep. The trust was too broken. I loved you too, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. I loved you with everything I had. But love isn't enough, Edward. It never has been. He closed his eyes, as though the weight of my words was too much to bear. For a moment, I saw a flicker of regret in his gaze, and I wondered if he wished he had done things differently, if he regretted not being honest with me from the start. But it was too late for those thoughts. Too late for what-ifs. I know, he whispered. I know, but I need you to know that I never stopped loving you, and I never will. I nodded, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. I wasn't sure if I could believe him, not after everything that had happened. But in that moment, I knew there was no use in fighting the feelings that were still there. I had spent so many years of my life with him, and despite everything, despite all the pain, a part of me still loved him. As the days passed, I found myself coming to terms with what was happening. Edward's condition continued to decline, his strength draining with each passing hour. There was nothing left for us to fix, no more time for second chances. The reality of the situation settled on me like a heavy fog, and I realized that I was facing a different kind of loss now. It wasn't just the loss of the man I had loved. It was the loss of what could have been. It was the loss of the future I had imagined for myself, for us. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the room, Edward turned to me again. His breathing was shallow, his face pale, but there was a sense of peace in his eyes now, a sense of acceptance. I'm sorry, Eve, he said one last time, his voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry for everything. I didn't say anything in response. I didn't need to. The silence between us was enough. It was the kind of silence that spoke of years of love, of pain, of understanding. It was the kind of silence that said everything that needed to be said. And then, as the night fell, as I sat by his side, holding his hand, I let go. I let go of the anger, of the hurt, of everything that had kept me trapped in the past. Because in the end, I knew that it wasn't about forgiveness or about forgetting. It was about peace. Peace for him. Peace for me. And when the time came, when he finally slipped away, I was there. I was there, not as his wife, not as the woman who had been betrayed, but as the woman who had loved him once and who, despite everything, still wished him peace. Life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges our way, and often, the hardest moments can teach us the most. The key is to never lose sight of who you are, even when others or circumstances try to define you. Betrayal, pain, and loss are inevitable, but they don't have to define your future. Take the time to heal, to understand the depths of your emotions, and to reflect on what truly matters to you. Forgiveness is a powerful tool, but it starts with forgiving yourself first. Learn to prioritize your peace over the need for closure or understanding from others. Trust can be broken, but self-trust and resilience are the foundations that will carry you through the hardest times. It's okay to walk away from what no longer serves you, to take space and reclaim your own path. Sometimes, the greatest act of strength is choosing to move forward, not because you forget, but because you choose to take control of your own narrative. Be gentle with yourself, seek support when you need it, and always remember that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself.